Welcome! This video explores sound files, how computers represent sounds, and how to work with them. So, to work with anything, a computer needs to reduce it to numbers, to a bunch of ones and zeros. And to do this with sound, there are multiple possible ways we could choose to represent sounds with ones and zeros. The first method is with the approach that MIDI files and chiptunes use. And that's basically to turn music into a set of instructions. So a MIDI file, musical instrument digital interface file, is like sheet music for a computer. It stores what notes need to be played, how long they're going to be played for, and then the computer's hardware is responsible for actually generating the music, for taking that recipe, that sheet music, and producing sound. These have been around since the 1960s. They're very kind of early form for representing music on a computer, and that's because early computers were not terribly powerful, and so this is a very compact way to represent music. There's not much information that needs to be stored. Chiptune is a similar idea. You store sound recipes. They can be notes. They can be abstract waveforms, basically recipes for generating noise in interesting ways that ends up sounding like laser guns, explosions, but has a very kind of tinny, old school sound. If you're interested, you can look up programs. Anvil Studio is one that's freely available for creating MIDI files. You can also generate MIDI files by hooking your computer up to a synthesizer or other tools. So if you know anything about music and you want to explore, feel free. The other way that we can represent sounds is, instead of storing the notes, to actually take what sounds are. So a sound is really just a pressure wave. Expressed over time, we might see something like this. If we were recording the pressure that a microphone feels at a given point in time, we'd see patterns like this when we record someone talking. So we can take that information and digitize it to turn those curves into samples, to measure the intensity at each given point of time, and to store that information so that we can recreate the wave pattern. Now, we can get more or less fidelity depending on how many different levels we have in the vertical axis. If we're talking about CD quality sound, there's 16 bits used to store the vertical information, so about 32,000 different levels that we can have, from being completely off to maximum intensity. And we can change the number of samples we take each second. So on CD quality sound, we take 44,000 samples per second, and that's kind of those two factors determine the granularity with which we can represent the sound waves. Better resolution on either of those dimensions makes for clearer sound because we can better reconstruct the original wave pattern. So all those samples are then stored to a file. And this is called pulse code modulation. And typically, if you're looking on a Windows computer and you're looking at a WAV file, or a Mac and AIFF file, those are common formats for storing this waveform data. These are very big. I think back to, if we're storing 44,000 times a second, we're taking a sample, that adds up very fast. So these music files tend to be very large. They're very easy for the computer to play because all it has to do is take that information and basically send those intensities out to the speaker, and instantly you've got music. But because they take up lots of space, people have invented ways to take the basic sound recipe, something like this wave pattern, and simplify it, to use various mathematical tricks to represent groups of these as one block of information, essentially. And that's what formats like MP3 or OGG do. They allow us to store that waveform information, but in a much reduced file size. By doing these mathematical tricks, they can compact the file down to about a tenth the original size without losing a whole lot of quality. It takes a little bit more work for the computer to play these back because it has to use some mathematical tricks to reconstruct the sound as it plays. But oftentimes, especially for music that is part of a downloaded game or if we just have lots of music that we want to fit onto a CD or something, it's worth making that trade-off. In GameMaker, it's worth noting that when we bring a sound in, we have multiple ways we can deal with the sound. It can be a normal sound or a background music. The big difference is that background music we can only have one of playing at a time, which is kind of handy if you have multiple things tagged as background music and you go into a new room and you start playing a new background music. You know that the old one will end without having to figure out which one was playing and to stop it manually. You can also use GameMaker to convert audio files to MP3 or OGG. Behind the scenes, it pretty much converts everything to an OGG file when you build your project. That's kind of its native format, but you can use it to do very simple conversions. To do anything more complex, you need a different program. So the program that I'm going to be illustrating is called Audacity. So if you download the Sound Stuff zip file from the website and you unpack it, you'll get this folder, and it's got a couple music files. You can see here's 2 MIDI files, and if I hover over this, we can actually see its size is 6.69 kilobytes. That's very tiny, 6 kilobytes, versus here is, and that's for a whole couple-minute music track. If this same file was stored as a WAV file, it would be many megabytes. We've also got a couple MP3 files, just some drum loops and Abe Simpson from The Simpsons talking, and this program Audacity. Now this will only work if you're on a PC. For a Mac you can probably find something similar. So Audacity is just a free sound editor. If I pop it open, I get this view, and I'm going to go back to my sounds, and I'm going to open this drums file. And so here I can actually see the wave format displayed graphically. And if we go zoom in, I can actually see the kind of curves, the pattern that makes up this particular sound file. And shrunk down, it looks something like this. I'm going to go ahead and play it. Alright, so it's a drum loop. We can do various things to the sound. There's all kinds of effects you can apply. But one of the more useful things is if you want to make a sound, say, fade out. So this drum loop, I want to fade out. I can use this envelope tool to lock in the sound level at the beginning, and then to compress the amplitude, the intensity of the sound as we go on. So now as the sound starts playing, you will notice it fades out relatively quickly and then kind of gets down to this very low level, and I could completely kill it at the end there. Alright, so I could save that and have a sound format that kind of gracefully ends. The other thing it can do that's pretty handy and pretty easy is to work with a sound file, and if I've got more than I care about, I can isolate a particular piece. So here's the Abe Simpson underwear file.
Grandpa, how'd you take off your underwear without taking off your pants? I don't know.
You can see that each burst of someone talking is represented by one of these big chunks, is essentially someone saying a word. And the Grandpa Simpson saying, "I don't know," is right there at the very end. If I want to isolate that, I could just go ahead and select everything that came before that and cut it out of there. And what I'm left with,
I don't know,
is just the part of the sound that I care about. And then I could save that, export as a WAV or as an MP3, and import that into my project. If I've got a sound that, say, includes some stuff that I want, but also includes some parts that I don't, I can use a program like Audacity to rapidly isolate the parts of the sound that I care about.